This Sunday,
the Friends are coming! The Friends are coming!
Sons of Liberty, history's new scripted drama.
Hand over the tray to Samuel Adams and John Hancock.
The untold story of a group of rebels
These are our streets!
who brought an empire to its knees.
These people are asking for a war. We're going to give them one.
Let's show them what we're made of. Fire!
A 3-night special event, Sons of Liberty. Premieres Sunday at 9, 8 Central on History.
ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
So I made a decision yesterday. I could have gone to the Florida State-Oregon game. But after my show yesterday, I looked at my producer, Vince, and I said, I think this is going to be an epic day. I want to see all these games. I don't want to be in a cab getting back to the hotel as Alabama and Ohio State are playing as I just left the Florida State-Oregon game. I want to see Auburn, Wisconsin. I want to see Michigan State, Baylor. So I gave my ticket up and I said, I'm going back and I'm watching these games in my hotel room for 10 hours. That's the most fun I've had in a hotel room by myself in my entire life. How great was yesterday? You know, if you listen to this show, I'm a football guy. I could take the baseball season off. I'm a football guy. And I've always liked college more than everybody else or most people at ESPN Radio. That's not Van Pelt, Russillo, they like it, but I love the NFL, but I've always I like college. I think it gets not enough love. Yesterday was incredible. Incredible. It was a great week for the Big Ten, and it was an embarrassing week for the SEC. We haven't said that in a decade. So let me give you my 2 or 3 takeaways. Number one, the committee got it right. Whine, complain, vetch. Bama, Oregon, Florida State, Ohio State. Who the hell are you going to take out? Bama was the number 1 seed. Oregon crushed 10 teams and then crushed the team that beat them. Florida State was unbeaten from a Power 5 conference. Sorry, TCU fan. It's easy after the Oregon game to say they're bums. They were going to make it. And Ohio State, yeah, I think they're deserving. TCU's a really good team. Sorry, Big 12. Get your act together. Figure out a championship game. We'll see you next year. But the committee was right. It produced magic and discussion. The old system had Florida State, Bama playing for a title. You know what the new system said this morning? Beat it, you two. Oregon, Ohio State are better. It worked magically. And it's not a social program where you should feel guilty if you don't feed the poor, where you should feel less about yourself if you can't give Medicare to the very poorest Americans. It's sports. Who gives a rip if one team whines about being left out? Get your act together, Big 12. TCU, congrats. But the 4 that got in from power conferences, won championship games, deserve to be there. Number 2, it's a great day for sports. And it's a great day for ESPN. Listen, we make a lot of mistakes. I certainly do. Some of our critics make excellent points. But the SEC bias crowd is moronic. We want geographical balance. I was getting texts last night from major analysts at this company. They were very happy. We would love every year to have Texas in, Ohio State or Michigan, USC or Oregon. And by the way, the Miami Hurricanes, because they'll get a rating in New York. Do you really think we're rooting for tiny rural markets in one corner of the country, statistically the poorest region? Yeah, that's what television networks root for. Hell, CBS has a better deal with the SEC than we do. Why should we promote their best product? It's a great day for Oregon and Ohio State. It's a great day for sports. Number 3. Do I now think the Big Ten's the best conference and the SEC isn't? No. The SEC's dominated college football for a decade, 8 titles, 7 straight, most NFL first-rounders, best bowl record, most wins by blowout. They're not going away. Watch their recruiting. But the no-huddle offenses, and I've been saying this all year long, have changed the game. They've changed the game. The SEC didn't have better receivers than everybody else in the country. They didn't have better left tackles. They had better guys in the trenches. and they have been limited. The no huddle has reduced the impact. And now it's about offensive-minded guys like Sumlin and Urban Meyer, and watch what Jim Harbaugh does. That's the game now. That is the game now. I don't think the Big Ten is now better, but I think the game is changing. It is reducing the dominance in the trenches of the Southern teams. The SEC West humiliated for a week. Humiliated, blown out. Number 3. Bama's boring. I'm over their dynasty. If you had to say one word to describe Alabama's dynasty, what would it be? Discipline? Ooh, let's party all night. They're boring. They're a better version of Jim Tressel's Buckeyes. Give me Oregon, Pete Carroll's Trojans, the Miami Hurricanes of the 90s, Urban Meyer's Gators. This Ohio State team is fast and fun and offensive-minded. They've got a swagger. They're aggressive. It looks like he went out and recruited like 9 center fielders in baseball. Everybody can catch. Everybody can jump. Did you see that play at the end of the game, that onside kick? Did you see that play at the end of the game? That play, nobody's talking about this morning. That was an athlete. That was a kid that had a 38-inch vertical that secured the win for Ohio State. That's what Urban Meyer does. So number 1, the committee got it right. Number 2, it's a great day for sports. Number 3, who cares that I picked Alabama? I think everybody is looking for a change. It was a great, great win for Ohio State. And I'll tell you this, Urban Meyer's 8-2 in bowl games. Nick Saban's 8-8. That was a coaching clinic. I'll be the first to tell you, did I think that Ohio State's third-string quarterback was going to come in and dominate the second half of the football game against Alabama? No, I did not. In fact, I talked to a buddy of mine who lives out in California. He's a big Ohio State guy, and he said, I just don't want to get embarrassed. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I like Jones. I like J.T. Barrett. My thought the entire game was, good Lord, what if J.T. Barrett was playing for Ohio State now? This could get ugly the other way. As far as, and you know what I did yesterday and I don't get to do very often? I was a fan. I was rooting for Oregon. I don't like the way Florida State's local police department seems to be in cahoots with a football team. I don't like the excuses and the whining. I like the way Oregon plays, and I was rooting for them. And believe it or not, I was rooting for Ohio State. It was fun. It was glorious. I'm over dominating defenses, one part of the country dominating. Yesterday was awesome. Todd Blackledge will join me today. I want to play Guess the Ratings. I thought it was the greatest day in college football. That was my prediction going in, and I think it delivered. The games were unbelievable. Michigan State, Baylor, Auburn, Wisconsin. Even the Oregon blowout was probably the most entertaining butt-kicking I've ever watched for 3 hours. And I'll tell you something else that is just... Let me guess the ratings. Let me guess the ratings first. All right. It's a holiday for a lot of people. I'll start with Oregon, Florida State. It was an ugly game, but it was really fun to watch, and I think a lot of people were rooting against Florida State. So I think it did pretty well. I'm going to guess a 12. A 13? A 14? A 15? What? 15-4. A 15-4. All right, Ohio State, Alabama. Now, this should get a better number. Oh, it didn't. Are you kidding me? How about a 14-9? A 15-2? So they both got 15s. Those are big, big, big numbers.
Technology gone bad. Gone bad. This is the Thundering Herd podcast.
Those games last night, I mean, Oregon's not 40 points better than Florida State, but when you started watching the body language of Florida State after those turnovers, 1 fumble, 2 fumble, Florida State quit. And 99% of Twitter at halftime said, seen this movie before, Florida State's going to win. That Oregon came out Florida State was driving to go ahead. Oregon pulled the football out of a running back's arms, and in that moment I thought, oh boy. They drove down and scored, and Florida State came back and scored, but it felt different. But football is like boxing and MMA. If you don't have confidence, and it can change with one hit, one catch, one drive, one moment. Bama led Ohio State in the second quarter 21-6. 99% of the people on Twitter, and don't even deny it, Ohio State fan, you were thinking, this is about to get ugly. It felt like Ohio State was in big trouble from getting buried. But then, 21-6, second quarter, Ohio State 12 plays, scores. You can look at the body language from the Buckeyes. It just changed. And it's just, you could just sense the Ohio State players were saying, hey, you had your best shot. You couldn't put us away. When Ohio State scored to make it 21-13, from that point forward, Ohio State dominated the game. In fact, the guy that really helped Alabama out was their punter. I mean, that kid had the best night any punter's ever had in a game. Ohio State was buried. But from that moment on, in Oregon, when they pulled that ball away from Florida State's running back and scored, you could look at Oregon's sideline. And after the game, there was a great quote from Urban Meyer. And this is how 19 and 20-year-olds are. When you're 19 years old and get a zit, it ruins your weekend. I'm 50 years old. I mean, as long as my kids don't die, I just get through stuff. I've been through a lot of stuff. Any 50-year-old has. Urban Meyer said after the game, he goes, I think the tide turned for our players when Wisconsin beat Auburn. No, I'm not kidding. He said that. He goes, the way we did against Wisconsin, and they went and beat Auburn, who went toe-to-toe with Alabama, that's the psychological approach to getting an 18, 19, 20-year-old to believe. Strong belief, said Urban Meyer, can increase your level of play. I saw it with Oregon when they pulled that ball out of Florida State's running back's arms. You could look at Oregon's sideline. They walked differently. When Ohio State scored 21-13, it's a different sideline. So Urban Meyer said, there's no doubt when we saw Wisconsin beat Auburn, that was a major, major moment for us getting ready for the game. How about that? And he said, we made sure everybody in the locker room knew Wisconsin beat Auburn. It is amazing what football does. Todd Blackledge is part of the game. ABC joining us, the Herd on ESPN Radio. Todd, I am shocked this morning. The way Ohio State for the last 2.5 quarters dominated Alabama with a third-string quarterback, Todd. You were there in the moment. Were you surprised by it?
I was surprised. Now, I knew that they could play with them, and I really felt that it would be a competitive game and that either team could win, but the game really hung in the balance there at 21-6. And when Ohio State was knocking on the door again, and I think I made the point on the air, they had to find a way to crack the code and get in the end zone. And once they did that and didn't have to settle for another field goal, you're right. I think their whole body language changed, and it started with their quarterback who, started out 0 for 5 and looked a little bit flustered. But from that point on, he played like a confident veteran quarterback, and their defense flew around, and I was very impressed. I thought that Ohio State, they were loose coming into the game. They were relaxed. Urban just asked the question. He wondered if his team was good enough, and I think for the majority of that game, they were not only good enough, they were the best team on the field.
Oh, there's no question. Todd Blackledge, who will also work the championship game on ESPN Radio with Mike Tirico. I don't like to use one day as a referendum. I don't think today the Big Ten's better than the SEC, but I would suggest this, Todd, that with the no-huddle offense, it has taken away the great asset of the SEC, those dominating defensive fronts, and the game has changed. Alabama can't stop Oklahoma. They can't stop Ohio State. They can't stop Auburn. Is it fair to say that the game now is simply different, and the Kevin Sumlins and the Urban Meyers and the offensive guys, Todd, it's their game now?
I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, the game has changed. I mean, and the greatest evidence of that is the fact that Nick Saban, when he brought Lane Kiffin into Alabama this year, he had already made the determination, even before hiring Lane, that he wanted to go to a no-huddle, up-tempo offense because he realized they're having so much difficulty stopping it, and whether it's Auburn, whether it's Texas A&M, that league is changing. The way you play defense is changing, and the offensive coaches and the guys that play that style of offense, that's where the game is right now. And so you can still play good defense and create turnovers and make big plays, but you're not going to stone people and just, have 14-7, 14-10 ball games very often anymore.
Yeah, Todd Blackledge, the Herd on ESPN Radio, worked the game last night. I don't know how Urban does it. He did it with Alex Smith, Chris Leak, Tim Tebow. Third-string quarterback. He has elevated him to an all-conference-looking quarterback. Todd, how does he do it? I mean, nobody does what he does with quarterbacks, and he does it immediately. What is it?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the difference between this game and the Big Ten championship game is they had an extra month to prepare Cardell. I think it was the perfect storm when they played Wisconsin because they ran the ball for 300 yards. Their defense totally dominated Wisconsin, and it was kind of easy for Cardell. And the 3 touchdowns he threw, he just kind of threw up there, and Devin Smith made some acrobatic catches. But this was different. This was a guy who was well prepared, who was accurate, who was throwing with confidence, who was playing with poise. And I think just a combination of Urban and Tom Herman, who is going to be a great head football coach at Houston, they just did a great job of preparing the next man up. And again, the thing about Cardell is he's not a rookie in the sense that he hasn't been in their system. He's been coached and taught and brought up in that system the same way J.T. Barrett was. And it is amazing, though, that you've had 2 guys during the course of this year that have stepped into the action and have played brilliantly.
It was such an emotional win for Ohio State and such a validating win for the Big Ten. I just wonder emotionally, Todd, if they can duplicate it. Oregon won the game. It wasn't an upset. Oftentimes when you beat a team and you upset a team, it is hard to duplicate that 10 days later. Do you think there's a little hangover for Ohio State next up?
I don't think so. I think the fact that they have a few extra days, that it's not just a short, normal week. They've got a couple extra days to get this one out of their system, to get back to Columbus. The fact that, this is new for everybody. It'll be new for Oregon, too. There's still that sense that, hey, we won our bowl game, and normally this is when things would end. And they both have to go back and regroup and get ready to play another football game against another high-quality opponent. So it's uncharted territory for both Oregon and Ohio State. And the fact that they have a few extra days, I don't think you'll have either team feeling the effects of that.
Todd, I think having Ohio State, having Oregon, I think it's good for the sport. That is not a knock on the SEC, but last night was good for the sport, in my opinion. Am I overreacting?
No, I don't think so. I think it is good. The SEC was the standard bearer for several years. They kind of set the bar extremely high, and people have caught up. And the game has changed along the way in addition to that. And I think it's great. I think that you in the matchup that we have now, 2 very exciting teams, very explosive teams. And really, when you look at what both teams did yesterday, one of the things that stood out when I was watching the Oregon game before our game was how well I thought Oregon's defense played. Not just creating turnovers, but how well they stopped Florida State and kept them out of the end zone early in that ball game. And I think the same thing's true with Ohio State's defense. Their defensive line is legitimate. They've got speed on defense, and I think it's going to be an outstanding matchup on January 12th.
Wow. You know what, Todd? The committee got it right, by the way. I mean,
they did.
They really did. I mean, nothing against TCU, but who in the world would you take out of that 4? I think they got it right.
Yeah, it was a great first year for the semifinals, and I can only hope that our next game is just as good as what we saw last night.
Todd Blackledge, absolute pleasure. Congrats on your work. Continued success, Todd. I'm a huge fan of your work.
Thanks, Colin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, he is a soothsayer on the air. I mean, nobody calls plays and trends like he does during the game. He does a great job. I think Ohio State, Oregon's going to be fantastic. Vegas has Oregon as a touchdown favorite. Urban Meyer's good in these games. I mean, if you look at their last 2 games, could Oregon beat Wisconsin 59-0? I don't think so. I don't know. I think it's going to be a great game. I don't even care. Listen, my heart is with Oregon, but Ohio State, I really am happy. I've known Urban now for about 8 years, 10 years. He's a great guy with a great family. I could not be happier for him. I had more fun yesterday. I got to tell you, I'm never taking this week off. A lot of people take these 2 weeks off during Christmas, and we all have to burn in any business. This has been the most fun I've ever had being on the radio. I'm not joking. This past week, I've been wrong the whole week. I've never had more fun. These games have been unbelievable. I mean, Michigan State, Baylor, Auburn, Wisconsin, that game last night. And even though it was a butt-kicking, I didn't miss a play. Oregon, Florida State, you got to give Mark Helfrich credit. I didn't like what the players did after the game, and I'm sure he was horrified by that because he's a wonderful guy. 20-year-old kids make dumb decisions, and I don't think rape's ever funny, ever, under any circumstances, and I'm disappointed, but it was not something he asked them to do. Helfrich is a world-class guy. Even rival coaches really, really like and respect him.
Want more of the Herd? The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Herd, you keep shouting. The panel got it right. What is your criteria? How do you justify TCU didn't deserve a shot? Tim Archer in West Virginia. Because who are you going to take out? Who am I going to take out? Oregon? Ohio State? They played championship games. And by the way, Big 12, outside of TCU, your conference embarrassed itself. Be quiet. The Big 12 was hideous. The only team that wasn't embarrassing, I mean, Baylor gave that game away yesterday. They had that game won. They gave it away. Your conference got smoked. Big Ten, great bowl week. The SEC and the Big 12 literally embarrassed themselves over the last week. So what, I'm supposed to put TCU in from the worst conference that I watched on television over the last 3 weeks? Who am I going to take out? After you have a great reception at a wedding, it's easy to go back and say, well, it would have been better if we had this guy in. The Big 12 doesn't have a championship game. Blame your commissioner. I'm supposed to keep Ohio State out after they beat Wisconsin 59-0 and just beat Alabama soundly? Come on, you're not going to keep Oregon out. They beat 10 teams, blew them out. Then they faced the one team that beat them, blew them out by 40. Who are you going to keep out? The committee got it right. You know, it's not a social program, folks. It's not welfare. I don't care if somebody gets their feelings hurt. I don't care if somebody doesn't eat tonight. I do in society. I don't in sports. So TCU went to bed hungry. I can live with that. I can't live with a 9-year-old kid going to bed hungry. I can live with a football team going to bed hungry. So quit whining about it. That's what makes sports great. 4 spots, 5 conferences. We're going to argue every year. That's wonderful. Then TCU went out with class and clobbered Ole Miss. Ole Miss lost 5 of their last 7 games. Slow down. Ole Miss lost 25-0 to Arkansas at a 17-game losing streak middle of this season. This is an interesting question. I want to take this call quickly because he brings up a good point. Seth, you're in the Herd on ESPN Radio. Seth, go ahead.
Hey, Kyle, thanks for taking my call. Diehard Buckeye fan, I just want to get your thoughts on what Tom Herman was thinking by throwing the deep ball instead of running 3 times, taking up the 2 timeouts and running some time off the clock instead of taking off 20 seconds.
Seth, a lot of people criticize Urban Meyer, but I'll say this, and I want to defend Urban Meyer on this. If that touchdown worked, would anybody call in my show? Ohio State went into this game being hyper-aggressive. They did trick plays. They took chances. They had that game. Alabama had 2 timeouts left. Everybody in the world, including Alabama, put people in the box. And Urban Meyer said, we're going to keep you guessing. We're not going to back into this. How many teams in college football lost leads this year? How about USC 5 times? Everybody loses leads. I'm going to defend Urban Meyer. It's easy to criticize when something doesn't work. But Alabama had 2 timeouts, and he said, we're going to go for the jugular. We're going to go right at you. We're not going to play it safe. Even though it's a boxing match and I've won 8 of the 10 rounds, I'm going for the knockout. I will always respect a coach who does that. Urban came in aggressive. They had an aggressive game plan. I loved it, and I'm not going to and I said that when he was doing that, I was thinking, oh, this is not going to go well. I love it. Nobody in the world, nobody thought they were going to go for it. They threw it over the top, and I totally respect that. And again, everybody's an expert after the play. If that baby hit, that would have been in your face, Nick Saban. I'm 8-2 in bowls. You're 8-8. That would have been, you shake hands after the game, and you stand a little higher over Nick. That was a statement play. We're not here to eat the clock. We're gonna go right over the top on you. This is our night, our team, our game. We'll control it, our terms. No apologies. I loved it. We're not afraid of you. We're going right for the knockout, even though we've won 8 of 9 rounds. We're going for the jugular. I loved it.
Colin Cowherd.
The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
This has been great. Had a great week here. Last night, as I said, I had a ticket to Florida State, Oregon, and I sat there and I thought after my show I was going to sit around for 4 hours and wait for the game, and I said, I'm going to the hotel. I'm ordering hummus and pita bread and a cocktail. I'm going to sit there for 10 hours, and I saw such great college football. It was just fantastic. It really was. Both games got over a 15 rating, which is just remarkable. I think Ohio State, Oregon, if it's a viable game, will get a 20. It'll be the biggest college football game since USC and Texas, which is the best game I've ever been to, collegiately at least. I thought this was interesting. When you make a mistake, you're best just to own it. You know what I mean? In life, okay, I own it. And I really love this column this morning by Pat McMenamin. ESPN.com covers the Browns, and this morning he said, enough. Browns should release Johnny Manziel and Josh Gordon. Now, Josh Gordon's only $600,000 to the cap, and you could get something for Josh Gordon. Somebody would roll the dice on Josh Gordon. The cap hit for Manziel is about $5.5 million. But, the Pistons cut Josh Smith, who's very talented. They've won 3 straight. They play the Knicks tonight. They'll win 4 straight. Talent doesn't necessarily equal wins. Carmelo Anthony didn't have very many good playoff runs. He's one of the great scorers of my lifetime. Johnny Manziel has been a whiff. Own it, move on. Bill Belichick whiffs all the time. Bill Belichick's whiffed on 7 college receivers. He's whiffed. Own it, move on. Johnny Manziel's an entitled frat boy. He's not a grown-up. He's told people, he's told Cleveland, he's told fans he's never going to change. Remember this?
I'm not going to change who I am for anybody. Am I going to live in a shell, or am I just going to hide from everybody and not do anything? I don't think that's the way I should live my life, and I'm not going to do it.
I'm not going to do it. He's an entitled oil money frat boy. He's not a grown-up. He'll never change. Josh Gordon has told you, this is who I am. Listen to him. Johnny Manziel's told you, this is who I am. Shame on you if you don't listen. ESPN Radio. Surprise somebody special with a gift just because. 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN for exclusive offers. Now, a lot of fans this morning they're just going crazy. And, it's just, I'm getting all these, the Big Ten. Big Ten is now better than, slow down. Recruiting, signing days in a month, outside of Ohio State, there won't be a single Big Ten team in the top 10. It was a bad quarterback year for the SEC. They'll still dominate recruiting, but the game has changed. There's no question. The game has changed. The no-huddle offense. Nick Saban has been listed as a favorite of 9 points or more in a handful of big games since getting to Alabama, but recently, he's not covering that spread, losing 3 bowl games and a conference championship when he was a huge favorite. So everybody's going to this, if you give Nick Saban a month to prepare, he's 8-8 in bowl games. By the way, Urban Meyer's 8-2. Urban Meyer has one big advantage over Nick Saban. Urban Meyer's an offensive guy. It's an offensive game now. Alabama can't stop anybody. All these SEC teams and their defense this year, it's because their quarterbacks were crappy. You don't have a single quarterback who's going to get drafted. Blake Sims isn't draftable. Bo Wallace, Dak Prescott. You don't have a draftable quarterback in the conference. Pac-12 is going to have 9 guys playing in the NFL. So it's just the game has changed. It doesn't mean the SEC is terrible, but the no-huddle has wiped out a huge part of a fundamental advantage the SEC has had. The SEC didn't have better wide receivers. It didn't have better safeties. It didn't have better quarterbacks than other conferences. It had better front sevens. But it's been wiped out by the no-huddle. You can watch these games now. Florida State was exhausted at times in the first quarter against Oregon. It's just a different pace, man. Get in touch with us, 1-800-FLOWERS Twitter feed. But do I think this morning the Big Ten's going to dominate college football? Listen, since 2005 when Texas and USC met, a team from the SEC played for the championship every year except this one. I don't believe the paradigm shifted. I do think Harbaugh's going to win and win big, and Urban Meyer's going to win and win big, and those two big dogs, the problem is they're going to knock each other out. But my preseason number 1 next year, without question, is Ohio State. They bring back 3 legitimate quarterbacks. One may transfer, but they bring back 2 guys capable of winning a national title. I can't believe. Can you imagine how good Ohio State would have been last night if Alabama's punter didn't have that night and if J.T. Barrett would have played? I don't think people realize Ohio State moved the ball. I mean, considering every drive started at the 3. But, man, did they pile up a lot of yards. And that's with half a dozen drives starting at the 4. Or that cuts out half of your playbook. But it's not like the SEC is the Berlin Wall. Mr. SEC Commissioner, take down that wall. You know, it's not. They're not going away. But the gap is, you can see, Ohio State wasn't intimidated. Oklahoma last year was not intimidated. Wisconsin was not intimidated by Auburn. You can see it.
You're in the herd. The Thundering Herd Podcast.
So I'm still freaked out by the Matthew McConaughey commercials. They're freaking me out. I've seen the Jim Carrey Saturday Night Live spoofs. They were hysterical. I just don't understand why he's got a suit on driving in the desert at 4 in the morning. I just don't understand it. The Rob Lowe commercials are getting better. They were a little shaky for a while. They're getting better. We got the NFL Wild Card Weekend. So give me a little music here. Let's go through. I don't feel strongly as far as spreads this week. It's my non-blazing 5, but I'll give you my takeaway and I'll make my picks. Dallas is a 6.5-point favorite. I think Dallas is going to win the game, but I would take Detroit in the 6.5 points. The Lions' defense is phenomenal. Number 1 against the run, number 3 in scoring. The Cowboys' defense isn't even close. And Dallas has been scoring a ton of points, but look at who they have played in the last couple of months. Jags, Giants, Bears, Eagles, Redskins, Colts. Detroit had the NFL's best rush defense, allowing less than 70 yards a game. They were first in yards rush per game, per rush, yards rush before contact. They're going to make Tony Romo beat him under duress with that pass rush. I think Dallas wins. They're not a great home favorite. In fact, they were a much better road team than a home favorite. If the game is close late, I think they could get tight because of their history. I'll take Dallas to win, but I'll take the Lions and the points. Cincinnati's getting 3 points at Indianapolis. I think this one goes down to the very end. I think Indy wins, but I think Cincinnati's a good bet with the points. Jeremy Hill has changed this football team. In the last 3 weeks, he's averaging 6.5 yards a carry. Now, Andrew Luck is unbelievable against the spread. He's 31-19 against the spread. Here's what I don't like for Indianapolis. They met in Week 7, and the Colts smoked Cincinnati 27-0. According to Elias, teams are 10 games under 500 historically when they face a team in the playoffs that they beat by 21 in the regular season. The Bengals were one of 2 defenses, Buffalo the other, to finish the season with more picks than touchdown passes allowed. This is a very close game, but I do like late in this game Andrew Luck to pull it out, but I would take the points 28-27 Colts. Probably the game I feel strongly about more than any other. Carolina is minus 6.5. I think they'll cover. The Cardinals are kind of a mess right now. third-string quarterback Ryan Lindley. They've struggled at times with running quarterbacks. And Carolina's defense in the last month has held 4 teams to an average of 11 points. The Cardinals have gone 7 straight games without a rushing touchdown. They've averaged 1 TD per game in their last 7 games. Now they travel cross-country. I'm going to take Carolina to win this game 28-13. I just think Arizona physically can't get it done on the road in this spot. Here's another game. I don't even know if I like this game, but my feeling is I've been on Baltimore for a couple of months now, so I'm going to stay with it. It depends. If the running back is healthy for Pittsburgh, they're probably going to win this game. But I'll take Baltimore to upset Pittsburgh. Halati Ngata is back from the suspension. The Steelers can be very vulnerable on the back end, and Joe Flacco has a history when he gets time of scorching teams. The Ravens and the Steelers always play close games. The Ravens have played 13 playoff games since John Harbaugh and Flacco arrived in 2008. That's 4 more than anybody else in the NFL. They've been in this spot. They've been on the road. They're a better home team than a road team. But when these teams meet, overwhelmingly, it is close. Okay? The Ravens only allowed opponents to convert 42% of their red zone drives, second best in the NFL. What that tells me, the Steelers will move the football but settle for a lot of field goals, and I'm going to go with an upset here, 27-26. If Le'Veon Bell isn't able to go or is less than 100%, that's an advantage for Baltimore because right now he may be the best running back in the entire National Football League. Good stuff. What's that stat? Hold on. 9 of the last 13 Steeler-Raven games decided by 3 points or less.
9 times.
Yeah. There you go. Todd Blackledge, Ray Ratto, Paul Finebaum, top of the hour, David Pollack later. After the game, Oregon players mocked Jameis Winston. There was a rape allegation, Jameis Winston, earlier this year. Mark Helfrich said in a statement, the Oregon coach, it was inappropriate. It's not what the program stands for. Interestingly, Oregon athletes have had their own sexual assault charges. They're 20-year-olds. It was immediately after winning the biggest game of their lives, but it's not a good look. I didn't like it. We should probably adopt a new rule in sports. Rape, allegations of rape, are never funny and should never be mocked ever. Rape isn't sex, it's violence. Our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, it is never, ever appropriate to talk about it, discuss it, act on it without complete seriousness. So I was disappointed. It was ugly. If I've got to explain it, you don't get it. It is violence against our mothers, our daughters, and our sisters. There's just no other way around it. It is never funny and never to be tolerated. So I didn't like it, but 20-year-old guys do really dumb things, and it happens sometimes. And I'm disappointed, but there you go. Oregon's favored by a touchdown over Ohio State. I've got to play a bite. Do we have the bite of Urban Meyer after the game? Mark Schlabach at this network asked him a question. This is one of my favorite bites of the year. So, Oregon's game ended. But, the last hour and a half, 2 hours of the game, Ohio State's not watching the game. They've got their focus on Alabama. So after the game, Urban Meyer probably heard Oregon won, but he didn't get a watch, especially anything after halftime. So listen to Urban Meyer, and Mark Schlabach asks him a question after they just beat Alabama.
I think Oregon won by 40 today. Can you talk about
Oregon won by 40?
What was the 59-20?
I gotta go. We gotta go get ready for that
one. Oregon won by 40. We gotta go get ready for Oregon. I think it's gonna be a great game. Oregon's an amazing story. They lost their great receiver early in the year. They lost their best cornerback. They had one of their best players get hurt early in the football game against Florida State. I would say they do it with scheme more than personnel, but their personnel's good too. I follow recruiting. They get good classes. They get top 20 classes. They get real players. And they get great quarterbacks and great running backs and, for whatever reason, great corners. They really get good corners. It's got a legendary track program. They get speed. Oregon gets speed. They've never gotten a lot of girth. They don't get the big heavies as much, but they get speed. They can run with anybody. And I think the one thing You notice with Oregon against Florida State and Ohio State against Alabama, they can run with anybody. This whole SEC thing, the SEC's advantage has never been speed. The SEC's advantage has been those big front sevens. Now they've been reduced because of the no-huddle offense. I don't expect the SEC to go away. I just think the bridge has been... I think TCU, after I watched TCU play in Alabama, you can make a very good argument. TCU would have done to Alabama what Ohio State did. You can make a very good argument. Oregon would have done to Alabama what Ohio State did. It's not like Ohio State shocked... that game by the middle of the second quarter, that was Ohio State's game. Despite the best punting performance I've ever seen a kid in my life have. That kid from Denver that kicks for Alabama, the freshman, that's an all-timer. That kid was incredible. It's very rare when a team gets lousy field position for most of 3 hours. Ohio State was pinned. It felt like for 2 hours they were pinned deep in their zone. But Urban Meyer has a history of this. He's 8-2 in bowl games, 2-0 in title games. I said during midseason, and people gave me, I got a lot of feedback. I said, listen, I think Urban's the best coach in college football. That's nothing against Nick Saban. I think Nick's great. But Urban not only wins, he wins faster than Nick. He won at Utah overnight. Nick never won at Michigan State. Urban went 13-0 in Utah and beat Alabama. Urban wins everywhere. He's still never lost a game in conference. He's never lost a game in conference, still. Ever. And he's, despite what any Ohio State fan thinks, Urban and people inside the program still absolutely believe they're a class away. They still need about 25 more guys. They went into this game thinking, we're young. They were wondering, are we ready for this spot? They didn't know it. They were wondering. So Ohio State's only going to be better next year. Steve, you're in the Herd on ESPN Radio. Steve, go ahead.
Yes, listen, how you doing? I wasn't that impressed with Oregon. I was deeply affected by Florida State catastrophe. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, if you score 59, just because a team turns it over doesn't mean you owe a score. Oregon had 9 drives this year of 36 seconds or less. I got to tell you something. When you watch Oregon play, they play a lot like Ohio State. I defended earlier. I defended Urban Meyer on first down, throwing the ball over the top with 2 minutes left in the game. And a lot of people, I wasn't on Twitter at the time, but I imagine a lot of people just went apoplectic. Oh, my God, you got to run the football. Urban Meyer was saying, we're not going down like this. We're not killing the clock. We're better than you. We're going to go right at you. We're not going to shrink. We're not going to try to eat the clock and just get this thing out of here. We're going for the knockout. You got 9 in the box? All right, playa. Let's go deep. Let's ball. And that's who Urban is. Urban's aggressive. He wants his teams to have a swagger. I got to tell you, those Ohio State receivers, they got a lot of guys that can jump and a lot. They really do. When it came, and I said this before the game, I knew Ohio State would run with Alabama. I knew Oregon would run with Alabama and Florida State. Ohio State and Oregon, they run fine. It's not a speed issue. It's in the trenches.
Putting style in black T-shirts. It's Colin Cowherd, the Thundering Herd podcast.
It was a great night of television. I think you have to be very careful about, because of 1 or 2 or 3 games or 1 or 2 or 3 days, changing how you think about anything. But there are changes, sometimes seismic, which happen all over business. In September of 2008, the country was doing fine. In October of 2008, we were in the biggest financial crisis of our lifetimes. Things change, and they change quickly. And I do think the no-huddle offense has reduced the dominating defenses everywhere. Nobody, including Alabama, can stop anybody all the time. It's all about space, getting out, no huddle, can't get substitutions in. And I've been talking about this now for 2 years. And I think coupled with the really mediocre quarterback play this year in the SEC, which I said over and over and over, I do not think they're as dominant. But I still think it's the best conference top to bottom. I think the Pac-12 is darn close. Paul Finebaum, who's been broadcasting SEC football for a long time, joins us. Is there just just a little bit, Paul, in the world of Alabama? Is there just a little bit this morning of, if not fear, of maybe the dominating, squishing, putting our thumb on teams, it may be kind of over?
Well, if there's not, there should be, Colin. You know Alabama fans pretty well, and they'll find a silver lining somehow, even though the sun has not come out in Alabama today. But I agree with what you've said, and I've heard you all year, and I wasn't sure you were correct because sometimes you're so deep in it and you're seeing these teams knock each other off that you can't really see the forest from the trees. But the quarterback play was terrible. Alabama pieced this together, and Lane Kiffin did a phenomenal job. And I don't know if the true story will ever come out about what a difficult chore it was to get Blake Sims ready every week. He had difficulty at times. They came up with unique and different ways to get the signals in because at times the players weren't sure. And they survived until they finally ran into Ohio State last night.
Listen, there's always been this kind of narrative that, Urban ran once Nick arrived in the SEC. I always agree. I always believed in his health issues, and I think, I trust people when they lose 30 pounds, they've got issues. But last night, did it feel like to you a little comeuppance? I kind of felt the whole game that there was a little something special for Urban to dig it into Nick. What is that relationship, according to your sources? What is it like?
I think it's very chilly, and I've watched Nick for a long time, and Urban as well, and there have only been two coaches that I think have gotten in Nick's head. Les Miles is one, and if you go back and watch the LSU-Alabama game every year, it's tight. Nick does not coach as well. His players don't play as well. And, so much was made out of his lead over Urban, but really it was two games, Colin. It was the two SEC championship games. The third game in 2010, 31-6, was in Tuscaloosa. That team was a shell of itself. And, that first game haunted Nick. He turned the table the next year, and Alabama fans made fun of Urban because he went to the hospital the next night, which is ridiculous. And they forgot what a great coach he was. Every time I would say on our show, I think Urban is the second best coach in the country, I would get blowback because people just didn't want to hear it. But you could have this debate now. I mean, whether Urban is the best coach in college football, and I think if he wins next Monday night, there will be many making that claim.
When we're both in the entertainment business. It is, I think fans think after our teams that we talk about lose, we go into a shell. But I found yesterday to be fascinating, and I do think, Paul, college football is better when it has some geographical balance. I thought yesterday was great for the sport. In the South, how does the typical Southern fan think this morning about what has happened, the little paradigm shift, if there is one, in the last 7-8 days?
Well, we did a film room last night live during the game, and the calls late were comical at times. I mean, there were a lot of excuse making, and I'm not really sure where it will go today, but I think SEC fans are not going to look at this objectively because they get so hung up on the week to week and saying, hey, Oregon couldn't go to Baton Rouge and Fayetteville and College Station. I mean, you've heard that over and over again. But this was a total embarrassment, I thought, for the SEC, and I think it hurts even more that it came up against the Big Ten. You know that rivalry,
yeah. And
almost every SEC fan felt like the Big Ten was done. Let's make fun of the Big Ten. After the first couple of days, the Big Ten may not win a bowl game, and look what happened. And I think that hurts even more. I think Alabama losing to Oregon next week, they could have gotten over that. I think the worst loss would have been to Florida State. Because because of geography, but Ohio State winning will not be easy to get over. I don't care what anyone says.
Paul Finebaum, the Herd on ESPN Radio. He's got a show every day, Monday through Friday. Check it out. I'm sure it will be an all-timer today. Paul, Ohio State, Oregon, eyeball test. Vegas says it's Oregon. Ohio State is so shocking to me what they did. Do you have a feeling either way on that game?
Well, I mean, I'm 0 for 2 yesterday, Colin, so you're asking the wrong guy. I really, I like Oregon, but you can make a case for Ohio State. I mean, listen, no one's done a better job this year than Urban Meyer. I mean, it is a masterpiece. I don't know anyone in the history of college football that has gotten more out of a team. And I realize they started in the top 10. Come on. But, down to the third-string quarterback who looked a lot better than Alabama's first string quarterback yesterday. I give them a chance. I do. But on paper right now, I'd probably have to go with Vegas, although Vegas has been wrong, as we both know.
Do you think Nick Saban's upset with Lane Kiffin this morning? Or do you think, as you said, he did a great job? What do you think Nick wakes up and thinks of Lane Kiffin this morning?
I think he's pretty disappointed because that one play after Alabama got the ball back to Blake Sims through the pick six. Was ridiculous. I know it was an execution situation, but you have Derrick Henry on the side, on the team who is having a great game. And then I joked last night. Did Derrick Henry go down to Galatoire's for dinner during the second and third quarter? You couldn't find him, and I'm not sure Amari Cooper has yet been found. So I think Lane got too cute. He tried some things that have worked in the past, but just simply didn't work against a really good defense.
Paul Finebaum, good talking to you, buddy.
You bet. Thanks, Colin.
Check out The Herd with Colin Cowherd weekdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com, and on ESPNU. The Thundering Herd Podcast.